Today we're going to talk about the top tourist attractions in Chicago and whether or not they are worth the crowds.
A lot of people come to Chicago to see some very specific tourist attractions. Some might even call them tourist traps. And many of them are very crowded, so we're going to talk about them and then kind of give you the pros and whether or not we think they're worth the crowds.
So the first step that we're going to talk about is Magnificent Mile, or Mag Mile.
Yeah. So the Mag Mile basically stretches from the river all the way up to where Michigan runs and like kind of converges with Lakeshore Drive. It is roughly a mile, and it's full of all kinds of shopping. There are restaurants there, but everything from the Apple Store to Vans to Bloomingdale's and Neiman Marcus and even high-end designer brands. So it is primarily shopping, but many people come here to visit the Magnificent Mile and go shopping. Would you say it's worth the crowds?
I would say it depends. It depends on the day, the time, and the day that you come.
That's fair.
Obviously, if you're looking for shopping, like the Lego store is near the end of the Magnificent Mile, and
we do fight the crowds for the Lego store.
I'm willing to walk against the crowds. They're nowhere near as crazy as maybe you would see something in New York, but they are very crowded, and you have to kind of shoulder to shoulder with people sometimes. So.
And it does depend. It depends on the time of year, and it does depend on the day. I mean, obviously, a Saturday in the middle of summer is worse, than even a Saturday in February, for instance. So.
And then it's not hard to kind of go to a side street and go down if you want to bypass any kind of crowds.
Yep, there's certainly ways to work around it. But I would say overall, for me, I don't think it's really worth the crowds personally. I think there are a lot of other things you can do in Chicago that are also crowded, but worth it. Yeah. So that's my personal opinion. But maybe for particular stores, it's worth it on some days.
Yeah. So the next step is Navy Pier.
Yeah. And so Navy Pier, there's so much to do at Navy Pier. Obviously, if you've watched any of our videos, you know how much we love to fly over. We've done it several times. That is a blast. We can tag that video here. There's tons of restaurants. There is a lot of shopping at Navy Pier, not like brand shopping. It's like souvenir kind of shopping.
Yeah, more souvenir shopping, more of some kind of little fun. They have a fun science shop. They have a fun kind of shop that sells fun socks.
Yeah, it's like knickknacks, games,
definitely
accessories.
More aimed towards tourists because that's kind of what it is. The Navy Pier is one of the top tourist attractions in the entire Midwest. There's millions of people visit it.
Yeah. There's the Ferris wheel.
Yeah, the Centennial Wheel. Mm-hmm. They have there's a fun house. There's a new attraction that we have not had the chance to do called Illuminarium. It's sort of like a virtual reality type experience.
Yeah.
Similar to kind of if you've been to the Van Gogh experience, but it's more like space and
I think they change it up too, don't they? The themes. I'm not sure about that, but I think they do. And you can catch not architecture tours. You can catch different boat tours there. That is where you get on the Windy if you want to take a windy trip out on the lake.
They have water taxis there.
Yes, there's also that children's museum there.
Oh yeah, there is.
Yeah, there's a children's. So there's tons
the
to
Shakespeare
do.
Theater.
Tons to do. There's even hotels. There's all kinds of stuff on Navy Pier. So for me, are the crowds worth it? Yes.
Yeah. I've never really been at Navy Pier, even in the peaks of tourist season, and it being too overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Obviously, inside it can get a little crowded, and you have to kind of push through the crowds because some of the hallways are a little more narrow. But otherwise, you can go outside, and it's pretty open, and it doesn't feel too bad.
Yeah, I think there's so much to do at Navy Pier and places to spread out that it doesn't feel as crowded as it actually is. In a lot of ways. So I wholeheartedly think Navy Pier is worth it. All right, next up is a more holiday-themed one, and that is the Christkindl Market.
Yeah, so the Christkindl Market comes every year. It's a sort of German-esque style market. They have them kind of throughout the country, but the one in Chicago is pretty famous.
It's like a little craft fair.
It's a great way to kick off the holidays. They have all of kind of, artisan shops, usually made in Germany. They have some kind of fun, unique things even there that aren't really German themed, like the little sock hats.
Yeah, I love those.
They have fun soaps and things like that, candles. Obviously, they have great food. They have German food. You can get pretzels and wursts. And obviously German beer.
And Glühwein.
I think, yeah, and I think, but then one of the main attractions is the hot chocolate.
That's true. Yeah.
They have the little
The souvenir mugs.
souvenir mugs that you
Yeah.
can get every year. They usually are dated, which we always get.
Yeah. Guilty. We collect those.
So it's a lot to do, but
It is incredibly crowded.
is it worth the crowd?
Yeah. Well, because let's talk about the crowds at Christina
Okay.
Market, because it can be, although, I mean, we have been at times when it's been less like this, but it can be literally shoulder to shoulder crowds where you
Yeah.
are just kind of like, squeezing through people.
Yeah, nowhere to stand, nowhere to even kind of think about what you're going to do next.
Yes.
You kind of just have to go with the crowd.
Yeah, especially if you go on the weekends. It can even have like a line that wraps like around. There's a building next to Daily Plaza, and it can wrap all the way around. So it can be incredibly crowded at the Christina Market. So is it worth it?
I think so. But just choose your time wisely.
Yes, I agree. I think it is worth the crowd. And I think if you are here and you're on a weekend day and you have no choice but to go on a weekend, it's worth the wait. It's worth the crowd. Go ahead and do it. But if you're able, try to do it on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday evening and a little earlier in the day.
Earlier the better.
Yeah. All right, next up is Millennium Park. So there are lots of parks, of course, in Chicago. Millennium Park is probably the most famous.
Yeah. Millennium Park has the Bean, which is probably the most popular thing to see in Chicago. It has the Pritzker Pavilion, the amphitheater, the Crown Fountain, which, if you don't know, are the fountains that spit water out.
Yeah,
That have
the
like
spitting
a little
fountains.
splash pad. A lot of people that live here call them
Kids
spitting.
love the
Yeah.
Crown Fountain. Yeah,
There's a lot of kind of sculptures and art kind of
throughout the park.
throughout the park that you can see.
And Pritzker Pavilion does things like music and concerts, many of those free, like throughout the summer and things like that. So that brings in a lot of crowds. So Millennium Park, of course, between the Bean and Crown Fountain and the events happening at Pritzker Pavilion can be incredibly crowded. And really even just the area and sidewalks around Millennium Park can get very backed up and crowded as they're kind of shuffling into the park. So is it worth the crowds?
My answer is going to be not anymore. I know that everyone wants to see the Bean. If you've never seen it, I do recommend seeing it in person. Yeah. Seeing it from the sidewalk is a lot different than seeing it face to face. But they have put a perimeter of fencing, kind of temporary fencing around the park, and on the weekends they it's been there for several years. On the weekends they require you to go through like a bag check, and it's safety things. It makes sense, but it makes the crowds, in my opinion, unbearable.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think, I would say the Bean is worth seeing if you've never seen it. But if you're coming here for a park, there are so many other parks that are better. Like, don't go to Millennium Park for the park.
Yeah,
There's
so
other options.
if you come during the week, I highly recommend trying to sneak in to get to see the Bean,
Yeah.
in
as early in the day as
so
possible.
as long as it's not Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
Usually they have the gate checks at those days. So any other day you can probably sneak in, and there's not going to be that big of a crowd.
Yep. All right, next up on the list,
Is the Riverwalk.
our very favorite. I think you all know how we feel about the Riverwalk.
So as someone that works on the Riverwalk every day during the summer, I have a special place in my heart for it.
I run on the Riverwalk in the mornings, also spend a lot of time on the Riverwalk. There are restaurants. There's, of course, the Bridge House Museum. There's, the little marketplace with a couple little shops. They don't have a ton of shops. That's where you would catch architecture boats and kayaks.
Kayaking.
There's, you can also rent some, various different kinds of personal boats. There are all kinds of things happening on the Riverwalk and on the river. Our absolute favorite place. It is very crowded, especially on the weekends in the summer. It can get extremely crowded on the Riverwalk. But in my opinion, it is absolutely worth the crowds. It is absolutely worth it. Go. Do not come to Chicago and not go to the Riverwalk.
So yeah, I would definitely say that the Riverwalk is probably the most popular place to see in Chicago. Obviously, the river is very prominent here in Chicago. I would say only really issue for crowds is when you're trying to move from one location to the other. When you're at a
like walking
place,
along.
it's not too bad. Like even at the restaurants and the bars, and it doesn't feel too bad. But trying to go through some of the underneath the bridges where the sidewalk's narrow, those can be a little what do you call them, tight points,
Kind of like bottlenecks.
Yeah, that definitely gets bad there. I've definitely had issues where I'm late to work because of this. But
Yeah, don't think you're going to be walking real fast up and down the Riverwalk.
regardless of any kind of crowd, numbers, it's 100% worth it.
One of the things I think is coolest about the Riverwalk is it's relatively new. It hasn't been around really that long because even like the first section of it was, I think, built in like 2012 maybe.
Yeah, the whole Riverwalk was finished in 2016.
Yeah.
And so it's only been around for 8 years.
A short time, really. And it is just, in my opinion, one of the best places in the city. So absolutely a must see.
All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about are the observation decks. If you're familiar with Sears Tower or the John Hancock, both of them have the Sky Deck or 360 Chicago or the Tilt.
Yeah, where you like tilt out. That one we have not yet done. Kind of adventurous. I'm not sure if I have the stomach for that one.
I definitely will need to do that because people ask me all the time, like, which one is better?
Yeah. But we did do the glass boxes at Sears Tower where you like walk out onto the glass box and like it's all, glass underneath your feet and everything.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. They do kind of control like the amount of people that go up into the Sky Deck and all of that. So I don't think it gets too terribly crowded, but it does cost. It costs to go up there. It costs to do the experiences. So for this one, we kind of said, is this one worth the cost? And I think it is at least once. I wouldn't say do it every time you come, but I'd say it's worth the cost once. And if you can stomach the tilt out on the John Hancock, more power to you, because that seems a little a little scary.
Once I do the John Hancock, the tilt, I'll let you know what I think.
If you think I can handle it.
Yeah.
I was a little like my stomach kind of dropped a little when we stepped out on the glass boxes because you're like, hope that holds. All right, so the last thing on our list is the Starbucks Reserve. This is actually found on the Magnificent Mile on Michigan Avenue. It is a unique coffee experience. There's only a few of them in the world. It's basically 5 stories?
5 stories, yeah.
Yeah, 5 stories, different layers of kind of, I think every level even serves different things, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And there's some even have alcoholic options. There are a lot of different options that you can't get. There's even coffee offerings that you can't get at a regular Starbucks. And as well as different like pastries and food options too.
Yeah, so first of all, it has a really cool spiral
It does have a cool
escalator, which is amazing. Yeah. That's almost like worth it there.
Right. Just the building itself is neat.
The coffee is delicious. It's kind of, it feels high end. Mm-hmm. Even the cups are like
everything's just a little nicer.
A little more higher quality.
Yeah. They do have a lot of merch too that you can't get at other, like even things like particular, machinery like coffee machines and kettles and things like that you can't necessarily get at every Starbucks.
Yeah. So are they worth the crowds, or is it worth the crowds?
I think yes, but choose your day wisely.
And I will say too that again with the kind of the observation decks, it is a little. It's not pricey, but it is the cost of the drinks are usually a little more than the normal ones. So when I went,
it is more expensive.
The last time that we went, I got a dark chocolate mocha, and I think I paid about like $2 more than like a normal mocha. Mm-hmm. So it's a little upcharged, but it probably tasted $2 better. So I think it was worth it. I don't think it's something that you need to go to every time that you're here.
No,
there are definitely things that when you come to Chicago, every time, that's definitely something that you probably want to do every time. And
like
there's some that you want to do maybe once, and then you don't really need to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah, but I do think the Starbucks Reserve is worth seeing. I would say maybe not worth like a super long wait. So if you happen to be in that area and you want to go in and check it out and it looks like you can get right in the building, I'd say go for it. It's worth it.
So these are a few things that we, as people that live in Chicago, like to think that are worth the...
I mean, these are things that we do as residents. Like we participate in a lot of these things, and have done or do these things. And so, wanted to kind of give our thoughts on whether or not they'd be worth it. For many people, if you're traveling to Chicago, you may only be here for a few days. So hopefully this helps kind of inform your decisions on how you want to spend your time when you're here. So if you like this video, give us a thumbs up.
And if you want to see more of our content, make sure to subscribe. We'll see you next time.